Okay, we're going to get started. Hello and welcome to our Women in Tech panel. My name is Aggie Stopka and I'm going to be your host this evening. I'm a faculty member at Seneca in the School of Electronics and Mechanical Engineering Technology. I teach all manner of computer engineering topics, including computer repair, networking, software, utilization, creation, a little bit of everything. I'm also joined today by my wonderful co-hosts, Neosha Safani-Rad and Karen Craigs. They're also faculty members with me in Summit. This event, of course, would not be possible without the wonderful support from NEM. Sarah's in here as well, and she's kind of helping us out with some technical issues. National Engineering Month hosts a number of events throughout the month of March to celebrate the diversity of engineering professionals and the opportunities available for the next generation. To our attendees tonight, thank you for being a part of this Women in Tech panel. It is important that you each recognize the power of your presence here today and in a continuous conversation about women in technology and in engineering. If you do have questions to ask our panelists, which I will introduce here in a moment, if you do have questions for them, please direct them in your chat to Karen Craigs. You can actually choose who to send a message to, and if you could direct them to Karen Craigs, that would be amazing. We're going to do a Q&A kind of at the end of our session, and Karen will kind of go through the questions and pick some really good ones to ask our panelists. The next thing that I'd like to do, we're all over the world right now. Tanya is in Florida, Julie's in Australia. I'm sure we have all sorts of other locales that are kind of dialing in right now. I would like to recognize the land that Seneca campuses are on. Seneca would like to acknowledge the land on which its buildings are housed and where students, faculty, support staff, and members of the public gather. This land is the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We are guests on this space, and it is our shared obligation to respect, honor, and sustain the land. So let's meet our speakers today. Julie Adshade is an electrical engineer. She's currently working and living in Australia. She's in Sydney. She's worked on several neat projects, including projects in oil and gas, solar panel installations, assisted hearing implants. So she's done a bunch of really, really cool things. Julie has also led some women in engineering workshops and camps for young women and girls. Our other panelist today is Tanya Balkin. She is an angel investor in the automotive and API technology space. She has had a number of successful exits in the past and is presently working with a Toronto-based API technology company. She is a passionate and dedicated technologist with years of experience in the technology field, supporting the automotive and insurance industries, and is a dedicated people manager and DevOps expert. So without further ado, we're going to go into our Q&A. So first question I directed to both Tanya and to Julie. My first question, and maybe we'll go with Tanya first. Tell us about your journey getting into the tech industry.
My journey. Well, I will tell you that it was by accident. I am a mathematical person in general, and I went to SUNY Albany back in the early 80s, and I wanted to be an accountant. And the accounting school was really tough to get into. And it turned out I got a C on my first semester. So if there's any students out there, you know how I felt. And it was really difficult to get into it, and I didn't know what to do, and I loved math. And my advisor at the time said, well, would you consider computer science? And I'm like, well, what is that? It was MSI at first and then computer science. And I said, sure. So the good news is I had no problem getting into the program, because I think we ended up with 7 women that year, with about 1,000 men in that same discipline. So I landed in it and I fell in love with it. It couldn't have been a better match for my skill set. And, you know, at that time, I don't think it was something anybody was looking for women to actively get into, to be honest with you. I think every one of us just kind of fell into it, you know, 1980, 1981. So that journey turned into my first job, turned into me acquiring the company that I first started working with, and ultimately turned into me selling it to a Fortune 500 company. So it was quite a journey. I've had one job, if you want to call it that, my whole career. But it spanned obviously everything from coding to training to support to developing to finance to acquisitions and sales. And, it was quite an extensive journey over my 30-year career. So that's my journey.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Julie, what was your journey like?
Yeah, so I think I've always been a creative person. I've always liked making things and experimenting with things, but I was never necessarily going specifically into engineering or into a science based field. I had a lot of different passions. I really like writing and doing all kinds of things. So I think I could have probably fit into the workforce really anywhere. But growing up, my mom was very encouraging of my sister and I to get into a science-based field and go and do a university course or degree that would lead to a job, not just something that she wanted us to do something that definitely connected with a job. So engineering, to become an engineer, and my sister became an occupational therapist, both really good fields, lots of work and that kind of thing. So that was really good. She was very encouraging of making sure we kept our options open throughout high school. So I had all of my, senior credits in sciences and maths to get into the engineering programs that I wanted. So that was really good. And then also my dad was an engineer. So although he wasn't really a part of our lives growing up too much, just having that influence, knowing that that is in the family, that is, those skills and that interest is there, that's kind of, nice to know. And then also, like in high school, I took a tech class, and in that class we got to do some basic electronics. We dabbled a little bit in AutoCAD. We did video editing and a lot of different tech things. And I thought that was just really cool. The really interesting thing about that class was a lot of my friends, all girlfriends, joined that class as well and were really interested in that class. So I thought, I don't know what it was about that class that appealed to our age group and like a lot more girls than you'd think at that time. But that was really cool. A lot of those girls didn't end up going necessarily into engineering and sciences, but the fact that they tried that out and decided maybe that wasn't for them, but that was really neat to try. That was really good. And then when I was starting to think about university, there was actually a summer camp at Ryerson, and it was an engineering summer camp for high school girls. And so I applied for that camp and I got in, and it was an amazing camp. I'm not sure if they still run it, but hopefully they do. They ran it for years and years and years. And it was a week that basically changed my life. And you got to every day go and experience a different aspect of engineering. So civil, electrical, mechanical, and we had little projects and they had people come in and talk to us. It was just so inclusive and interesting. And then when I went to Ryerson, so I did my electrical engineering degree at Ryerson, I ended up running that summer camp for 2 years with our boss, but also another girl who was another student at Ryerson. So that was incredible. And then it was really nice giving back to, high school girls who were considering engineering and, being able to implement new activities for them and stuff. So, and then since graduating university, I haven't really done electrical engineering specifically. So that's one thing that, when you graduate, you'll notice that you kind of do tend to maybe drift here and there, and you're not really sure where you're going to end up. And that's kind of an interesting adventure. So, as said in the beginning, I've been in a lot of different industries, mostly as a production or specification type role. So it's been across mechanical, it's been across various fields and backgrounds. And lots in manufacturing since I moved to Australia.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. The next question, Tanya, did you have a mentor? And if you did have a mentor, how did they influence you?
So I didn't have a mentor, I guess, in the official capacity of a mentor, right? I hear about mentoring programs. I was never really involved in an official mentoring program. But I will tell you, my first boss was, you know, a life-changing guy to me. I mean, he was one of two people that owned an Apple store on Long Island. Okay. And I mean, Apple was, you know, the little Mac was around. We're talking, like I said, 81. I graduated college in 85. And when I met him, I started working in this back room, and he hired me, and that's a whole other story. But anyway, I didn't have the skills that he needed, but I convinced him that I could get the job done. I said, give me 30 days. I don't even have to get paid. Just let me go with this. And he's like, you're out of your mind. And I said, yeah, pretty much, but I need that first opportunity. And that's one of the hardest things to do, is to get your foot in the door. And he opened that door for me, and he told me, and this was the funniest thing, he said, Tanya, he said, the days of computers are done. Everybody already has a computer, okay? What we need to do is build software, because nobody has software to run a business. And then he threw a magazine at me, threw it down. And he says, you see this guy? And it was a picture of Bill Gates. And he says, he goes, this guy, he's not much to look at, but man, he is something else. He is going to change the world. And he says, do yourself a favor, hop on a plane and find him, marry this guy. And so with that, obviously I did not do that, but I said, who is this Bill Gates? And my boss got very much into Microsoft and was just fascinated with the ability to build his own computers, right? Because Mac never really let you do that. So my boss was he never even went to college. He went to college for one semester and said, I can't do this. He's a serial entrepreneur. And he started, he got involved. He got on the phone with the guys at Steve Jobs and his buddy and said, I want to open up an Apple store in New York. And he was just tenacious. And he really just taught me that, yeah, it's great to have your degree and you have to have it, right? I mean, his daughter was a lawyer. Don't get me wrong. He's not against school, but he said school's not for everybody. And unless you really know what to do with the knowledge that you got in that college, I have no use for you. So, let's see, you got chops, and let's see what you could do. And that, and I was with him for 8 years before I bought the company from him. And we had so much fun, and we grew it from nothing to, a relatively small company, and then grew it even more. And the journey was just phenomenal. And, he was a lot older than me at the time. I'm 21 and he was like 55, which I'm more than 55 now. So at the time I thought he was, older. Now I think he's rather young. So yeah, I mean, he just always had great things of wisdom. He always put me out there. He gave me enough rope to hang myself, as they say. And if you can come out of that, you will be successful, so I don't know if you want to consider him a mentor, but certainly influential in my life.
It sounds like he made quite an impact on you. That's awesome.
I love him. I still talk to him to this day. So
that's awesome. Love it.
Yeah. Good
Julie, do you want to talk about maybe your mentor, if you've had a mentor, like what that influence kind of looked like?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I love that story, Tanya. That reminded me of, I've been working for about 16 years and had a lot of different coworkers, a lot of different bosses in that time, and, some good, some not so good, mostly amazing though. And, that story actually reminded me of a few of the bosses and, leaders in the companies I've worked with. And, I would say, so I just started a new job here in Sydney, and I've been working here only 8 weeks, so I'm still getting my head around things. But in my last job, I was there 3.5 years, and my manager took over being my manager when there was a lot of flux in the company, and my old manager had left. And then he basically came down to me, like it was just after Christmas, and said, okay, yep, so-and-so's gone. So right now I'm going to be your manager. And it was kind of like, we're just going to see how this works. We're just going to try and make it work. And he's like, I don't know how this is going to work out. So he ended up being my manager for the last, I think, year and a half I was there. And it was just amazing. He was quite hands off in terms of, he let me do my thing. And then if I needed him, he was there, and it was fantastic. And obviously this was just more recent. So, but your story just reminded me of great manager mentors. And some of the feedback he gave me, even though, he sort of apologized for not being as involved because he was stretched so thin in that time period. He said to me, I'm sorry that I haven't been able to give you all the time that you need. And then, but that's really a testament how great I thought you were working. I didn't think you needed me and stuff. And when I left, he said to me, I know you will do whatever you want, whatever you put your mind to, you'll do it. And I was just like, oh, I didn't realize you thought like that about me. That is just so nice. And it was so encouraging. And I respected him so much because we'd had a lot of tough conversations over the year, just with COVID and like changes in the work structure and all this kind of stuff. So I relied on him and got support from him so much. And that helped so much more than I've ever had from a previous manager, and so much more than I needed before too during this time. But to go back and to answer the question about a mentor sort of earlier on, I didn't really have a specific mentor or, someone in technology who stood out for me per se. But I would say if I had someone I looked up to who was a really good influence and was, I guess, an unofficial mentor, would have been my grandfather. And, he was an amazing person who moved in with my mom and lived with her for the last sort of 7 years that he was around. And he was so dynamic, and he was so, creative and always building things. And my mom always gave him projects to do because he was just always so active. She's like, I don't know how to keep him busy. But I would go and help him with these projects. So this is when I was just, in university, and I'd come home on the weekends and we'd work on projects, and we'd, put up doors together or fix things. And, he taught me a little bit about, working with tools and that kind of thing. Now he was a dentist by trade, but he had a lot of great knowledge to share and just a lot of good wisdom and that kind of thing. And, one of the things I remember him telling me was that he said, I believe we're all on this earth to help people, to help everyone. If you find someone who needs help, we should help them. And I always just thought that was so encouraging. He was a very giving person and very good at, I think, just living a life that was good for him, but not too much. He had what he needed, but he gave away a lot of his time and energy and knowledge, and was really well liked. And also Karen Craigs was, lucky enough to know him as well. So I think I looked at him and I thought, well, that's just a really great person and a really great life to lead, and someone I'd like to, take after.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Sorry, I had to unmute myself. I forgot that I was muted. Thank you for sharing that. Your grandfather sounds like a really, really influential person in your life, and that's really nice. Thank you. The next question I have is can you speak to your biggest challenge and your biggest success? And they may not be the same thing necessarily. Tanya, do you want to maybe try your hand at that?
Biggest challenge. Well, I would say, the biggest challenge initially was, I was really in a man's world, and believe me, I don't play the, male female card much. It's not. It never really affected me. But in the beginning, as a woman who is 22 years old, the technology side obviously was male driven, and forget about the automotive side. Okay. If you think technology is all men, you got to look at the automotive side. And not only is it men, but it's, good old boys, a very strong network of I would say close to politicians to some extent, right? Like just really tight knit, men. That was probably the biggest challenge, was for them to take you seriously. I could, I nipped that in the butt relatively quickly, because a lot of people didn't really, I think the best thing to do, best advice anyway, I would say in that kind of space, is to really know what you're talking about. The more you know, like, don't ever speak if you don't know what you're talking about. Men will do that. I don't think women do, because they would be the first ones to get a, well, do you know, and did you know, and you're wrong, right? So, but when you do know what you're talking about, speak loud and speak proud, and just, do what you got to do. So I think that was the biggest challenge. And like I said, I nailed that pretty quickly, because, back then, even the guys didn't know. The automotive guys didn't understand what computers really did for them. I mean, what they paid in computer systems, they had UNIVAC systems in their car dealerships. I mean, crazy old technology. So I was perceived more like a computer expert, which I by far was not, rather than, I guess a woman going into the field. So, and the best thing I ever did was learn how to golf and learn how to outdrive the men. Okay. So you get a good drive on the tee box and they will listen. So that was probably my earliest challenge. My later challenge was working with investors, taking on money from outside investors to build my dream and to sell my company. That was brutal, probably the hardest thing that I ever had to deal with. And in general, I'm a people person. I'm a people pleaser. I tell you what, people start loaning you money, it's a whole other game. And it's not easy. So I would say that's the biggest, and hopefully something I don't have to do again personally. Yeah, those are my two.
Cool, thank you so much. Julie, biggest challenge, biggest success?
Yeah, I think my biggest challenge, and this is something that's been ongoing but has gotten better with experience and over the years, is just self-confidence. And I think that's something that a lot of women have always struggled with. When I talk to and hear women talking about feminism and issues they have in the workplace and what have you, I think confidence is one of those things that, yeah, women just aren't there yet. And I think there's so many reasons for that.
Moxie. Moxie.
And I think, yeah, like Tanya said, that is a really good point. I totally 100% agree. Know your stuff. Knowing your stuff, coming in prepared, reading up, talking to people. You can go into a meeting and kind of own your thoughts. Sure, it's okay to be wrong, but at least you're prepared and you can, hold your ground on something. But I mean, I think with me, yeah, like, you can get questioned by men and stuff, but I think for me, it was not so much the outside aspect of someone asking me or questioning me or whatever. It was just how I felt inside. It was just questioning, do I belong here? Is this the right fit for me? Like, do I really know what I'm talking about? And all this kind of, but I think that's very common for not just women, but men, kind of wondering if they're really the right fit, or they're doing the right thing, or what if I said the wrong thing? I don't know what I'm talking about, and all this kind of stuff. But I think, yeah, for me, confidence is something that has come with experience, come with time, trusting myself, and also seeing a lot of other people and working with enough other people who clearly didn't know what they were talking about. And after a while, you go, no, that's actually not right. This is what it is. And you can show them that they're incorrect. And I think that there's a lot of power to that. And just realizing after, well, just to trust yourself, I think that lack of just, I know what to do. Like, I'm a smart person. I get a lot of good feedback. There's no reason why I can't do something and this person is better. It's in your head. So I think just getting over that for me has been, a stumbling block, but it gets better. I think when you move to a new job or a new field, or you're in a different situation, that can sometimes come back. But I've definitely found over the years, it just gets better, because you're just kind of more comfortable with yourself and who you are and what you know. And I think in terms of biggest successes, just in general, I've noticed throughout my entire career, I've been very lucky to be, I guess, noticed as a leader or put in the place as an unofficial leader. I've never really done much management per se, but I would say I've always been a go-to person, or the person who knows how to do this, that, and whatever. Oftentimes it's the processes of the company that I seem to excel. I know, yep, that's what we should do. This is the template. This is how we should go about doing this. We go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And whereas other people might be like, I don't even know where to start. And I think being given those opportunities early on, like even when I was really young in my early 20s in my oil and gas jobs, I remember being like a designate at meetings for my manager and stuff. And that even happens, like that's happened all the way along. And I've always thought that's really great. I mean, they put this responsibility in me, or they, trust me, they trust my opinion, or, that the fact that someone's putting that trust in you means you should definitely put that trust in yourself. So that's been a big thing for me. Like, here's an example. In my last job, I was working there as a production engineer, and they wanted to hire me as someone who would do process improvements. So I had worked previously in a medical device company manufacturing area. And so I had lots of ideas on what they should do. And, they should be really doing this, that, all this stuff. And in the first couple of months that I was there, my first task was write down everything that you see that you think is wrong here, and all the things you think we need to improve, and come up with ideas and then present them to us. And I was like, wow, this is fantastic. This is really cool. So I did that, and I had meetings, and, we talked about, we should really be improving this or adding that or whatever. And they trusted me to actually reorient the process flow of their production area and move things around, change things, get rid of things. All that was okay, but I thought, they don't even know me. I've just started working here. I'm saying you should do this and not that. It was fantastic. And at the end, they were very happy with how it turned out, which I was worried, the whole time, oh my gosh, what if I'm doing things that they really hate it? Thank goodness they didn't. And, they put that faith in me, and I was able to prove that, I know what I'm talking about. And here I've fixed things in your production area. It was a great success for me. It made me feel great.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. The next question that I have, it actually kind of ties into what both of you were saying about, some of the biggest challenges and having the confidence and having the moxie and stuff like that. And I've experienced this as well in my careers, is having that confidence and being kind of labeled as a troublemaker for it a little bit. So the question that I have is, how do you combat and retain your credibility and integrity while working in an environment that has those kinds of biases?
Well, I think the answer is to know your stuff. I think, it's funny, if you go into a room with 20 people and, 2 of them are women and there's 18 men, you find that they don't say much. Like I personally I have difficulty with something that's wrong, right? Like I hear somebody say something in front of a room and it's outright wrong, right? And you want to say something, and often it's not the time or the place. I think part of it is you got to find the right place and the right time. I was a very good note taker. Now, I wouldn't go in a meeting and write notes, okay? I'm very good with one word, boom, John said, boom, and that would come back to me. I don't know. I don't know. Julie, what do you have to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's difficult. I think what I've seen work is when it comes from the top. For example, my old manager was really good, I think, at just the language used and being inclusive and stuff like that. So I remember him, we would have these scrums or stand-up meetings and stuff. And the one specific example I remember is when he was talking about man hours. He's like, something's like man hours. We were always looking at man hours. And he's like, man hours is not really that inclusive. That's kind of a weird, and some people will look at that and go, oh, you have to be, politically correct and all this stuff. But I thought that's really interesting. He's made that note because he's come out and he said, this is maybe not the way we should be doing it. Let's question it. And we kind of moved on from it. But I heard him do that and say that in other instances as well. And I thought, those ideas of interjecting that positivity or that change or just that idea that maybe we should be calling them, work hours or something else is pretty fundamental, because on the flip side of that, you'll have an environment where people who are, or maybe trying to add, a more poisonous environment or a more toxic environment, they will input, maybe sexist jokes or off-putting comments or things like that that are, not inclusive. And it's hard to kind of find those things or point them out, but they're maybe ongoing and really small. But when it's from the other way and you see it from the top, and he's trying to dispel these ideas that, we should be calling something man or something that's very exclusive to groups. I had a lot of respect for, and it even blew my mind because I thought, well, I've never even thought of that. And, some people just don't. And I think, in some cases it's hard, but I think as much as possible, if you can speak up on it. Now, sometimes you just can't, and it's not the right environment. And in those cases, I think if you can't bring that up, at least face to face with somebody or to your manager, I think, some environments you can't change and they're toxic, and, you should look at leaving or looking into something else, because, there's no point fighting an uphill battle that you're just not going to win. And then maybe not being able to keep your integrity over that. But I think those small changes that come along can be very powerful. And then repetition over time of nope, that's not okay. Nope, that's not okay. Or yes, this is what we're seeing. Can be really helpful.
Yeah, and I would have taken the man hours and said, yeah, it takes them 2, it takes us 1,
And that would have been an interesting thing to say at that point. I didn't even think about that, but yeah.
That's a good one. No, that's good.
It never crossed my mind because we used to talk in man hours too. I mean, it was nomenclature, that's what we did. And that it never even occurred to me. That's funny.
Yeah. But if we called them women hours, people would be like, why are you calling them women hours? Why do we have to make such a gender statement about it? It's like, oh, really? Well, we make a gender statement when we say man hours.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, never crossed my mind. Did we answer your question? I'm not sure.
Sorry?
Did we answer your question?
Yes, you did. Thank you. No, I appreciate the answers, because that's one that I struggle with myself, in my personal professional life. So you guys offered some perspective that is actually really helpful for that question. The next question, I'm just going to give a little bit of background for this in case maybe some of our audience attendees aren't familiar with the topic. I want to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome. And if you're not aware what imposter syndrome is, it's basically it's the experience and it's a personal internal experience that you believe that you're actually not as competent as you actually are. So you might be, in a position where you are well suited for and you have all the skills in the world to complete a task, but there's like a little block that says, I'm actually not supposed to be here. I'm not able to do this. Other people are going to think that I'm also incompetent. So to Tanya and to Julie, have you ever dealt with imposter syndrome? I know I've dealt with it as well, and I have this conversation a lot with other people, but have you ever dealt with it? What are some strategies that maybe you've used to overcome that?
I can't say that I've really dealt with it. I mean, I was pretty much my own boss at 27 years old and have been my own boss. So I never felt that way. I hear what Julie is saying, and I hear it a lot. And I've hired many women and men, and I've sensed it, and it's very common. I don't know why. I just always came from I don't know where I got it. Like my parents will tell me the same thing. They're like, "Where did you come from?" Like, we don't have that. That's not in our genes. Like, my parents are both from overseas. I mean, I was actually born in Croatia. I'm not even born and bred. I mean, I'm bred in this country. I came here when I was 5. But it's not something that is, I to some extent, I think it's just in you, I just always thought I knew. And if I didn't know something, I figured it out or tried to, and always came across as knowing it, even if I didn't. So maybe I'm the imposter on the other side. I'm a reverse imposter. So that's and I haven't worked for anybody really. So there's not a lot of, what am I gonna, who do I have to please, or who do I have to answer to? So Julie probably has more perspective.
Julie?
Yeah, I think probably not too much more than what I've already said, but definitely, yeah, obviously from my previous answers, it's something that I've dealt with. I don't know where it comes from, and I think it's built into society, and it might be to do with some of your relationships. Yeah, I'm not really sure. It's difficult though. Yeah, I don't really have much else to say about it. Just, yeah,
No, that's
I think
okay.
I've kind of,
Yeah, it's a personal experience for anybody who does experience it, and a lot of people don't experience it, and that's okay, right? So I'm okay with that. Maybe we'll pivot to a different type of question. What are some ways your industry is making changes in the world? Whatever kind of changes they may, maybe social changes, technological changes, whatever they may be.
I would say Julie should answer that. I haven't worked in 6 years.
Yeah, so currently I'm working for Saluda Medical, and basically they've developed a device for pain relief that's basically implanted in your spine. And so there's like a little device that's kind of about this big, and it gets implanted in your side. And then there's 2 leads that are basically put up in through your spine, which doesn't sound that pleasant, but yeah, it is an interesting and innovative device because it's, I think, the only one where it's a closed loop feedback. So what that means is it is constantly getting information from the patient on how they're going with the stimulation that it sends out, and if it needs to adjust. So if it's the proper amount of stimulation, is it too high, too low? And then it will keep feeding back and making changes in real time. Also, the patient has a little remote that they can use to make those adjustments themselves. And I think that's quite a powerful thing where a lot of people are living with chronic pain, and you don't want people on medication for years and years. And this is an Australian device, an Australian design, and this is somewhat still of a startup company. So it's pretty exciting because you see a lot of the people who were here when it first started, and I think that someone said they started with only about 28 people to get the product launched and to market. They're still trying to get into the American market, but they're in Europe and in Australia. And the fact that it's an Australian made device and design device is pretty incredible. So that's helping people manage long-term chronic pain. And it's also doing it in, I guess, arguably a better way because you're getting that feedback. Previously, I've worked for Cochlear, and I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with Cochlear. It's an Australian-based company as well, and designed and manufactured in Australia here in Sydney. And also really interesting because it is a hearing implant. So you may have seen people walking around with a device attached to the outside around their head area around here, and then they'll have something behind their ear that is attached by some wires. And then there is a device that's implanted on the other side, and basically the part that's on the outside is adjoined by using a magnet to keep it in place. So it's something you can see, but it's quite small. It used to be actually quite big, and they had it clipped to your, pants and running down your back and stuff like that. So it was quite cumbersome to use, but now they've made it a lot smaller and stuff. So that's made usability for someone with a hearing impairment and changing the way they can live their life to an amazing degree. Also, I remember, not sure, they haven't done as many implants for Saluda, where I work right now, for the pain relief, but for Cochlear, for the hearing implant, they've been around for 30 years. So they've done a lot of trials, and they've been around in all kinds of countries for a long time. They can implant, I think, as young as 3 months, I think, is their youngest implant. Now, normally it's a bit more than that. And they are doing a lot of implants in seniors as well. But it really kind of depends on the type of hearing loss that you have, and like what your needs are and all that kind of stuff. Some people have gone from hearing aids, and then they've decided hearing aids actually aren't really that good, and they move to a hearing implant, and then all of a sudden their quality of life changes. And there's been studies that have said that as your hearing deteriorates, so does your cognitive abilities and your social abilities, because it means people tend to withdraw from social situations because they can't hear in situations that are very noisy. And so people, end up being very lonely. They end up, having cognitive decline, and just basically their quality of life is not very good. So from the point of view of hearing and being able to help people from a young age, and also if you're being able to implant from, essentially a baby onwards, that means that you're not missing out on all that speech development or all that learning that is so important at certain stages of 1 and 2 years old, or under 5 and stuff, where you need to hit these certain stages, and hearing is a part of that. It's fundamental. So I think those are 2 amazing companies and products I've worked with in my career that are doing some really incredible things to just help people live better lives.
That sounds amazing. Thank you. Tanya?
Yeah, no, I was just listening to her. It's funny because I know 2 people that actually have the cochlear implants.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
It's amazing. It's and one is young, like in his 20s. He just got married. It's an amazing product.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't really I don't know. I don't really have an answer to that. So
That's okay.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah, no, that's fine. I appreciate you guys answering. Thank you. We're actually going to turn it to Karen now. And Karen's just going to she's going to ask you maybe if there are questions from the audience. She's going to pose them to you, and we'll go from there for the next few minutes anyway.
Great, thank you so much. And it's so great to hear your stories and sharing your journey with us. And we do have a couple questions from the audience. Tanya, at the beginning, you mentioned the golf advice, and about 20 years ago, when Julie and I were actually at Ryerson together, I remember going to a Women in Engineering event, and what was one of the pieces of advice from panelists learn golf and make sure you can drive it. So that's pretty funny.
Hit a ball, yes, yes.
And Julie, the influence from your grandfather, he was obviously a very positive role model, and thank you for bringing that up, and your academic pathway as well. So one of the questions here is, perhaps you can expand on that for our viewers, because some of them are students and getting into the engineering technology industry. What courses or programs do you think would be helpful for young women to become interested in tech, but also to stay interested in technology?
Go ahead, Julie.
Yeah, I can take that. Yeah, I think it depends on what you're interested in. So, for example, like for myself, being in electrical engineering, things like learning to solder and learning how to buy components that are specific to your needs, learning how to code and that kind of thing, definitely of value. And I think the more skills you can get, the younger you are. Like if you haven't started working yet and you're like, how can I bring value to the first company I go and work for? Because I have this diploma or this degree and it is great and I'm young and I'm ready. But I think what might set people apart is having those extra skills. So that doesn't have to be like, if you're like, well, I'm not into electronics, what else? Look at what might be applicable to your field. So one thing I can think of off the top of my head is there's always that person in every company who's a guru at Excel, for example. And it's like, maybe that's not your thing, but maybe that is.
I'm going to say that. That's so funny. And I'll tell you my story when you're done.
But there's always someone who's like, talk to that person because they know Excel. And I think if you can try and learn those one-off skills, or those, they might seem small or insignificant, but things like Excel are very powerful. You use that for everything and in every company. Try and find something that's useful that other people won't have, that maybe won't just come in a degree, that you can either take as a continuing education program, or you can take through a college course, or even just online. I'm doing some online coding courses right now for app development. Not because I think I will necessarily get into that in my role here or like professionally, maybe on my own as a hobby. It is something I'm interested in, and it is something that keeps my technical skills up because it's just another thing ready to go. And it's like an interesting talking piece in an interview, or when I meet people in a company for the first time, I tell them, oh, I'm teaching myself app development because it's kind of an interesting thing and it goes with some of the skills I have. So I think go with what you're interested in and go with what will be applicable. And then if there's any professional development courses or less technical courses like project management or decision-making courses, things like that come up, that you can just use in the tech or engineering industries, those would be helpful.
Yeah. And, I would say logic, anything that can help you logically think about things. I mean, it's funny, like you said, Excel. Like one of the questions that Aggie said is, what technology can you not live without? I cannot live without Excel. I could hardly go food shopping without Excel. Okay. I mean, I am a list maven. And I have two children. I have two boys, one who's 23 and one who's 25. And one is a mechanical engineer and one is an electrical engineer. And I told them both, I said, I don't care where you go to school, and they all went to good schools and they graduated. And I said, but before you go to work, you got to learn Excel. You got to learn Excel and you got to nail it and you got to own it. Because if you know that, you can run circles around people in any company. So it ends up, my oldest took my advice and he got hired at an electrical engineering firm, which manufactures and develops all kinds of, they do radios, radio technology like MTA underground and cell towers and radio communication, which if you can believe it, it's actually still a big thing. Because it's not connected to the internet, right? It's like old school technology that is private, and they can really control police departments and all these kind of municipalities. But they sell about 30,000 products. And they had this group of 15 people taking orders. Like, it was so hard to take orders on this system that it literally took 15 people to put together 100 prospective quotes. Okay. And my son couldn't take it. Okay. He couldn't take it. And he ended up writing a little piece of code that sits on these little devices that spits out the data. And he built in logic that says, oh, if I order this, these 5 components go with it. And these 5 components go with it. And here's their IDs. He cut down that staff from 15 people to 3 people. And those other 12 people, guess what? They have massive skills and product knowledge that were able to be used in other areas. And that had nothing to do with his job. He still did his job. He is actually the designer of building those components. So saying, you know, this has to go, this is what this customer needs. How do I fill, you know, what does he have to get to? And he found it so redundant and so boring that he wrote this app. So, you know, to me, the best advice I can give you is to use your brain. I mean, I think people don't think as much as they used to. They rely on technology to think for them. And I think there's a lot you could do just to, I don't know how to hone in on those skills, but, you know, be in a position to try to look at things a little differently. And, you know, it's not always a high-tech solution that's needed, depending on your job and your role. But, you know, if you could save a company time and ergs and energy, that really goes a long way. So
that's great. That I mean, you're speaking to the diversity of your own, you know, experiences, but also just being interested in different things, right?
Oh yeah.
Thank you for that. We had a question earlier, and I guess this question was for Tanya, but it could be generalized probably. From the audience, I am a mechanical engineer and worked in the automotive industry for over 6.5 years. And I agree with you that systemic misogyny is a big challenge for women engineers to be taken seriously in industry. And you spoke a little bit about this earlier. Like, what do you think needs to be done to encourage more women to go into, and this question is specific to mechanical engineering, but is, what's your take on this?
I don't know what can, you know, I think the world is changing, right? I think companies are looking for women to fill these slots, right? They want a certain percentage. And I think they're having a hard time finding this percentage. My God, if I was a woman today, I would be heading right to that engineering school, because I mean, you'll be working, you know, right out of college. At least that's what I'm hearing. My niece is a civil engineer. She's graduating this May. She is, I don't know where she got the brains from, but she's like #1 in her class, in her college class. I'm so proud of her. And you know, the world is just, she's going to get her master's at Stanford University. I can't believe it. But she's also got a lot of common sense. I don't know what, I don't know. I don't, I mean, Julie, you know, I wish I knew what to tell them. Like I said, I think it would be easier today, because every company I talk to is like, oh, we have, you know, our internship program we have 100 people in our internship program. I'm talking about Turner management in the city. I know this because of my niece. And they want to fill, you know, 30 slots out of 100 people. They want 30 women, and they can't fill the slots. So, I mean, to me, it's pure economics. You want to get a job, get into engineering. That's the way I look at it. I don't know.
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
think that those are really good points. And I think I would add, like, 20 years ago and earlier, I think being different, so being a woman was maybe seen as a negative, and, well, you don't fit into our little box, right? Whereas I think now this is a great time to be not fitting into a box. The more you don't fit into a box and you bring something different, I think the more you stick out, but in a good way. Employers are saying, well, we have a team of, maybe if you have a team of people who are all fitting into this box and you hire one person who's different, brings new ideas, different skills, different this, different that, that's an advantage. And sure, you might stick out, and you might feel like you don't fit in and whatnot, but I think it's a massive advantage. And I think it's an advantage that employers and managers want and see these days and value. And I think if you're worried about trying to fit in or whatever, don't fit in. Be the type of employee or engineer or whoever who you want to be. I think that's how I've tried to be with engineering. I'm not a typical engineer. There was no one who looked and seemed and acted like me. I do my job differently from how other people do their jobs. And I think that's my advantage. And that's what I bring as something different and something necessary to this company, to all my roles. And that's valued. So, play that up.
You're 100% correct. And we do think differently in general.
Yeah.
And we do fill holes that go totally unnoticed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. I want to keep hearing your perspectives. We are almost out of time, though. So I just want to thank you once again to Julie and to Tanya for speaking this evening about your experiences and kind of your perspective, and being so open and honest, and at times a little vulnerable, I guess, because there's a little bit of vulnerability in what we're talking about. I do also want to thank NEM one more time, and for the sponsors of all the events, which I'm actually going to pull up on the screen just really, really quick. This one. There it is. Those are the sponsors. There's also a little poll that I'm going to pop up here for everybody. This is for all the attendees. There's a little poll just about this event. If I can. Oh, yep, I'm having technical difficulties. Here we go.
You got any technologists in the room?
Okay, I think that should show up now, maybe. Did you guys get it? Okay, good. All right, so there's just a little poll there. We're gonna be logging off here very shortly. Thank you once again. I really, really appreciate our speakers. Thank you for attending, for the ones that registered and popped by. Thank you so much. And I hope you all have a really wonderful night.
Thanks for having us. It was great.
Thank you. It was fun.